Imagine this, every light suddenly goes out. Within seconds, your heart starts beating faster. Every tiny sound feels dangerous. But why? Even though you know you're safe, your brain still reacts as if something is hunting you. The truth is, this fear is hundreds of thousands of years old, and it may have helped your ancestors survive. Tonight, when the sun goes down, you're going to flip a switch. Light will flood the room, and you won't think twice about it. But for 99.9% of human history, that switch didn't exist. When the sun set, the world went dark, completely dark, and something old inside you still remembers what that felt like. You call it a fear of the dark, but that's not quite right. You're not afraid of darkness itself. Darkness is just an absence of light. It can't hurt you. What you're actually afraid of is what darkness hides, and your brain learned that lesson long before you were born. Think about the last time you walked through your own house at night without turning on a light. Your heart rate ticked up, your steps got slower, your eyes strained to find shapes in the black. That reaction wasn't a choice. It happened before you could think about it. Where did that come from? To answer that, you have to go back. Not a few decades, not a few centuries, millions of years. For most of human evolutionary history, your ancestors were not the most dangerous thing in the environment. They were prey, small, slow, soft-skinned primates without claws, without fangs, without night vision, and the animals that hunted them did their hunting after dark. Big cats, hyenas, snakes that struck from shadows. Darkness wasn't a mood, it was a hunting ground, and your ancestors were the meal. Here's the strange part. The humans who survived long enough to have children were not the boldest ones. They were the nervous ones, the ones who felt a jolt of unease at an unlit tree line and chose to stay near the fire instead. That unease saved their lives, and they passed that unease down to you. This is what evolutionary psychologists call an adaptive fear response. It doesn't need a real threat in front of it. It only needs the possibility of one. Your brain would rather make you flinch at a shadow 1,000 times for nothing than fail to flinch once when something is actually there. A false alarm costs you nothing. A missed threat costs you everything. This is sometimes called the smoke detector principle. A smoke detector that goes off every time you make toast is annoying, but a smoke detector that stays silent during an actual fire is deadly. Evolution doesn't build for elegance. It builds for survival math. And in that math, a jumpy nervous system beats a calm one every single time across enough generations. So your ancestors who felt nothing when the light faded, who wandered comfortably into unlit brush, who slept without posting a watch, those ancestors were more likely to be caught by something with teeth. Their genes didn't make it to you. The genes that did make it to you belonged to the anxious ones, the ones who paused, the ones who felt that prickling sense that something might be watching even when nothing was there at all. You are quite literally descended from the warriors. Researcher Daniel Kruger, who has studied evolved threat perception, has pointed out that fear of darkness lines up closely with fear of predation, not fear of the unknown in general. You're not scared of dark rooms because they're mysterious. You're scared because your body still runs old software built for a world where dark meant danger. Your body still runs it literally. Deep inside your skull sits a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. Think of it as your brain's alarm system. It doesn't wait for your rational mind to analyze a situation. It reacts first and asks questions later. When light drops, your amygdala doesn't calm down. It gets more active, scanning faster for movement, for shapes, for anything that might be a threat. This happens whether you're standing in a genuinely dangerous alley or your own hallway. Your amygdala doesn't know the difference. It just knows the light is gone. There's a reason this reaction feels the same in a 5-year-old and a 50-year-old. Neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux, who has spent much of his career mapping fear circuits in the brain, has shown that this pathway is one of the fastest and most primitive in the entire nervous system. It bypasses conscious thought almost entirely. You don't decide to be afraid of the dark. Your brain decides for you in a fraction of a second, using a circuit that predates language, predates tools, predates almost everything that makes you feel modern. Here's what makes this circuit so strange. Information about a possible threat can reach your amygdala before it ever reaches the part of your brain responsible for conscious reasoning. Ledoux called one of these pathways the low road, a shortcut that trades accuracy for speed. The low road doesn't care if the shape in the corner of your vision is actually a coat on a hook. It reacts first. Your heart rate spikes, your muscles tense, your breath catches, and only afterward does the slower, more careful part of your brain catch up and say, relax, it's just a coat. By then, it's too late. Your body already believed it for a second. That gap between the jolt and the explanation is where the fear of the dark actually lives. But here's where it gets interesting. This fear isn't just biological. It's cultural too, and it was passed down deliberately because it kept children alive. Think about it. Why do so many cultures, completely disconnected from one another, tell stories about creatures that come out at night? Wolves, witches, spirits, monsters under the bed. These aren't random. They're warnings, dressed up as stories, told to children who were too young to understand statistics about nocturnal predators, but old enough to remember a scary story. Anthropologists studying oral traditions across hunter-gatherer societies have found a consistent pattern. Stories told after dark are disproportionately about danger, death, and moral behavior. Researchers led by Daniel Smith, who analyzed storytelling among the Agta people of the Philippines, found that nighttime was reserved for cautionary and social stories, while daytime conversation was mostly practical. Darkness became the classroom for danger. And the lessons stuck, generation after generation, long after the actual predators disappeared from most human environments. So by the time you were a child yourself, you didn't need a lion in the closet to be afraid. You just needed the dark and a culture that had spent thousands of years training humans to treat it with respect. Think about how universal this is. In West African traditions, spirits are said to walk after sunset. In Scandinavian folklore, trolls turn to stone in daylight but roam freely at night. In Japanese tradition, countless yokai are described as creatures of darkness and shadow. These cultures never met. They developed independently on different continents, separated by oceans and thousands of years, and yet they arrived at strikingly similar conclusions. Darkness is when the dangerous things come out. That's not coincidence. That's convergent culture built on top of convergent biology. A story is cheaper than a scar. If a culture can teach a child to fear the dark using a tale about a monster, it never has to lose that child to an actual predator to teach the same lesson. Fear, in this sense, isn't a malfunction. It's a form of inherited memory, encoded not in genes this time, but in language, passed from one generation of storytellers to the next. Now here's the twist. You don't live in that world anymore. Statistically, the modern night is safer than it has ever been in human history. Streetlights, locked doors, security systems, phones with flashlights built in, and yet the fear hasn't gone anywhere. If anything, in some ways, it's gotten stranger. Consider this. Studies on childhood fear, including work referenced by psychologist Graham Davey, who researches anxiety and fear acquisition, show that fear of the dark often isn't inherited directly from a real threat at all anymore. It's learned secondhand. A child watches a parent hesitate at a dark doorway. A child hears a scary story. A child sees a horror movie poster. None of these are lions, but the old circuitry doesn't care. It was built to learn quickly from any cue that danger might be present, and it still learns that way, even when the danger is fictional. This is why you can know, rationally, completely, with total confidence, that there is nothing in your closet, and still feel your pulse quicken when you have to walk past it at night. Knowledge doesn't override instinct, it just argues with it, and most of the time, instinct wins the first round. Think about how many modern industries are quietly built on top of this ancient wiring. Horror films don't invent your fear, they borrow it. A dark hallway on screen triggers the same low road in your brain that a dark hallway in your own house would. The director doesn't need to show you the monster. Darkness alone does most of the work, because your amygdala fills in the rest, the same way it once filled in the shape of a predator crouched in tall grass. Even your smartphone plays into it. Notice how much brighter your phone screen feels the moment you check it in a dark room. That small glowing rectangle is doing the same job a campfire did for your ancestors. A pocket of light in a world your body still doesn't fully trust. There's something almost humbling in that. You live in a world of satellites and supercomputers and instant global communication. You can summon light with your voice. And yet, somewhere inside your skull, a very old part of you still checks the shadows the way your ancestors did on the savannah 100,000 years before any of this existed. It raises a real question. Is this fear a flaw, something to overcome, like a bug in outdated software? Or is it something closer to a gift, quietly passed down from every ancestor who survived long enough to keep the line going? Maybe it's both. The same wiring that makes you tense in a dark parking lot is the wiring that once kept a small, vulnerable primate alive long enough to become you. It's not irrational. It's inherited caution, expressed in a body that no longer needs it as often, but hasn't been told to stop. So tonight, when you flip that switch and the room fills with light, notice the small relief that follows. That relief is ancient. It's not really about the light bulb. It's about 10,000 generations of ancestors who felt the same relief around a fire, in a cave, under a sky with no other light for 100 miles. You're not afraid of the dark because something is wrong with you. You're afraid of the dark because everything went right, because the nervous ones survived, because the cautious ones passed it on, because somewhere in the dark, a very long time ago, your ancestors listened to that feeling instead of ignoring it. And that feeling is still with you, not as a weakness, as an inheritance. Tonight, when the sun goes down and you reach for that switch, you won't just be turning on a light. You'll be doing what every human before you has done since the very first fire. You'll be answering the dark.